Hello, can you hear me? Great. So, closing panel for today. We've had an incredible couple of days here talking about the breadth of innovation, the breadth of opportunity. We've talked to some scale companies in fintech, in payments, and there are a growing number of those. Now, for this sort of end of the day slot, we've got a panel of investors really to talk us through what it is that they're looking for. And I guess really the kind of balance between innovation and investment. And we have a really great conversation with a very rich panel, so to speak. So please join me in welcoming Gilbert from FinTLV. Could we have Nabil please join us, JP, and Shinaz from Google. And I don't know if Alan is with us also. Oh, hey there. Great. I'll just take my notes. So thanks for joining us, guys, and good to have you on here. We don't have a lot of time. Okay, fine. Okay. So not all of you have got pictures. It's Nabil in the middle he's not up there actually. So Nabil is board member at GIDEA and one of the partners at Gulf Capital, a private equity investor here. So just to kick this off, I guess we've heard a lot over the last 3 days about the breadth of opportunity in this region. I think probably the best place to start on that would be with Gulf Capital. Gulf Capital as a private, a later stage private equity investor, an investor in GIDEA. Tell us a little bit about the journey over the last couple of years and investing in this booming tech scene in the UAE and increasingly across the rest of the Gulf.
No, absolutely, and thank you again. I think we're towards the end. I think my name is the last name in the session, and again, that's probably one of the reasons it's not there. But basically, when we talk about private equity, we're talking very, very different than other forms of growth capital. So we're in the late stage. We're basically looking at a controlling / strategic stake into a business, which defines the way that you look at that opportunity. In other words, you're not looking at investing in a business and going round after round after round. You're going in to roll up your sleeves, operationally heavy, get involved into that business, and that basically gets our business and investment strategy at Gulf Capital to be slightly different than a lot of the other fintech players and fintech investors. So we look at the stake, we look at the stage of the investment. So most of the companies that we invest in, actually all of them are profitable companies. At least they would have had one profitable business, and either on the product or on the geography. So we come in at a much later stage. And then when we start deep diving into the fintech scene itself, we actually go to the subsector one by one and look at it from a regional perspective. So we all know about payments, wealth tech, insurtech, regtech, all these different subsectors, one after the other. And then within each one of them, you obviously have the B2B, B2C, acceptance, and so on and so forth. So marrying these two, we try to also identify the strategy of that investment. Because sometimes you might want to invest in the incumbent. Other times you go after the challenger. So overall, I would say yes, the overall PE scene, if you look at it compared to VC, if I recall my numbers correctly, last year there was around $15 billion going PE into fintech versus 10 times that number in VC. But then the bets are really concentrated. And as a friend of mine once said, once you get into the PE side, it's as if you're moving from grammar school to college.
So back to college, I guess. Shinaz, let's talk to you at Google, not an investor, but somebody working on the inside directly with the startup community. I think you mentioned you've been here, you've been in the region, a few years. How has that? How has it changed? How has the kind of pace of innovation, the startup community as a whole? How is that changing here, and what are you seeing?
Thanks, Simon. Hi, everyone. My name is Shinez. I work for Google. I am the Business Acceleration Head, where I work mainly with scale-ups in fintech and retail, and we help them grow using Google platforms. So what we've seen on Google Search, on YouTube, on the App Store, is a massive growth of fintech. Year over year, there's been a 70% growth since last year, and UAE is the main driver. So there's definitely a lot of interest for the vertical. But a couple of things are very interesting that we observed. The first one is obviously cryptos, and if you've invested in this, I'm sorry. just like myself. But crypto is one of the top topics right now on Google, and we see it with a lot of new exchanges coming to the region, like Rain, BitOasis, CoinMina, and all of these are partners we started to engage with. The second one is trading platforms. Same Sarwa, we have Thunder in Egypt, and you would be surprised because in the UAE, we have an audience called Avid Investor, and it's 4 million people. You never think. And the last kind of big trend that took the market is the BNPL, buy now, pay later. It really took a lot of the fintech growth by storm, and where we see the biggest growth in BNPL is surprisingly Saudi. So Saudi has over 1,300% growth in queries, and people are very interested in buying things that are not offered right now in BNPL. So for example, phones. And I know yesterday in the pitch competition, there was a company who pitched for phone installments. We see people asking, can I buy a car on 12 installments? So there's definitely a lot to come. But yeah, I would say crypto trading platforms and BNPL are definitely the top risers for us that we have never seen before.
And are you helping kind of deploy some of the data analytics that you have access to through Google for the startups that you interact with? How does that play out?
Yeah, we typically look at their categories, and we look at a couple of indicators, so top rising or new emerging, and then we tell them there's an opportunity here, or this audience is looking for this, or your brand is competitive with another brand. So this is the messaging that you need to discuss, and I'll tell you a bit later about the type of queries that we get because they're so interesting. You know, when I got to Google, I had no idea we can understand the general population this much. People will ask Google things they don't ask their wives and husbands, right? So we see a lot of very, very interesting queries.
Of course. JP, maybe we turn to you. Tell us a little bit about your sort of interest in this market and your track record.
So we are idea stage or pre-seed investor and incubator, completely different and little more risk taking. We are based at Singapore and having partnership with Khazanah, which is Malaysia's sovereign fund, and they have supported us to open blockchain village in city called Iskandar right across Singapore, and we are running incubation center there. Regarding our experience pre-COVID, we have invested in 15 plus startups, and as I said that seed level or idea stage investments are always risky. We are sector specific VC, and we have invested in crypto and blockchain during that time. So 9 out of 15 startups has passed away during crypto winter, but 6 sustained. 3 are already making revenue and raising funds, and 3 are still bootstrapping. Post-COVID, the innovation trend has changed. So I'll take around 1 minute more for that. The entire crypto market has moved to new innovations like NFT. In 2020, in 21, we have seen metaverse, and now entire world is talking about Web3, where people want to get away with credit card, debit cards, and adding those OTPs and other things. It's just like you search, select, and while pay, you just swipe and fund is directed from your wallet. And I'm very happy that Google has just started accepting crypto, and that was a big announcement.
Announced this morning, I
Yeah,
think we saw
thank you.
that, didn't we? Yes, absolutely. Alan, we'll come to you, and then Gilbert, last but not by no means least. What are you seeing in the region? What's the relationship between innovation and investment over this way? Give us your perspective and
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the region is once it's quite similar to the challenge that the European market has, because you've got quite a lot of countries, they're similar but not 100% similar, different regulators, and scaling across economies, what the European fintechs need to do is actually a similar challenge which we see in the Gulf. So we primarily invest in around A, so a little bit later, and we're particularly working with PE funds where we prepare through VC stage where PE can come in. So we kind of have a feeder fund into PEs. We're relatively technical on that. So what we see in the region, one is that challenge is actually done quite well to scale between the countries and different regulations and even this. The other, a little bit higher concentration on crypto than you would see in Israeli market where we work or in European. There it's still more very real economy focused. What problem do the fintechs actually solve? Where here there's a little bit more on blockchain tech and a little bit more you can call visionary on this. So that's, I think, the similarity and the differences.
Gilbert, I think you mentioned it's your first time here. I think you might have said, obviously as an established venture investor into Europe and Israel and further afield. What are you seeing over here? What are you observing over here? And are we likely to see you deploying capital into this market in the sort of nearish future?
So thanks for having me here. Maybe a short minute about FinTLV. It's a global venture capital fund based in Israel, but obviously investing globally, but mainly in Europe, the USA, and Israel. We haven't done anything in Asian markets and not in the Emirates yet. Obviously, as I told you before, I feel that we are missing something, right? Because there are so many opportunities, and I see the development. It's a huge market for financial services as the economy is evolving, digital services are evolving, and financial services are mandatory in this kind of a climate. Our fund is focused on insurance, InsurTech. It's a little bit different from the regular fintech, right? And I even believe that in the future you will see it as a different sector out of fintech, right? Because it behaves differently, it requires a different understanding of the business and the value chain and the customer behavior. But I can say maybe two things about what I'm seeing in other markets, and I think that here maybe it even could be more dominant because the crypto and blockchain, I think here are more dominant than I see in other markets. So the first one relating to trends that I see is the embedded finance and embedded insurance specifically. I think that these kind of services will be embedded into a customer digital journey more and more. Obviously, you see it in fintech like BNPL, but we see it also in InsurTech and insurance services tend to be need to be pushed to the customer, right? Not always the customer knows to acquire or to look for the right product. So embedding that into digital journey is a great opportunity, and we see it. And I think that also what I see in other markets and could be very much related to here is the distributed finance, the ability to provide financial services from other sources than regular banks by using the crowd cryptocurrency projects. We see that around the fintech, distributed finance, and distributed insurance, where the capital invested through cryptocurrencies projects are used to insure other players, other customers, and not directly through insurance companies. I think these two opportunities could be huge in the future here in other markets.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. We're having a panel on payment an e-commerce this morning where some of the players there were very much sort of going in that direction, not insurance, but certainly thinking actually, almost by default, we may not have open banking rules, but we have the data, we have the partners, we kind of have the ecosystem. So now, perhaps we need to be thinking about sort of taking a bit more risk in the transaction, balance sheet lending, and so on. So yeah, very interesting. Financial markets are complex animals, aren't they? Insurance in particular it's a complex business. So what do you look for in founders? Because it's very easy for relatively speaking, it's easy to come in and say, I have an idea, we can revolutionize this market. What are you looking for in startup teams that kind of are able to address a solution, but also come at it from a deep enough understanding?
So I think the first one is that we look for a huge opportunity in huge markets, right? So even if the company eventually will have a relatively small market share, it could still reflect on a huge revenue stream or company valuation. So it is very important to look for these kind of opportunities, although I would say that on some companies, especially on early stage companies, sometimes there is no market and they will create that. It's a very difficult and challenging opportunity or situation to invest in. You have to believe in that domain. But on the regular basis, we look for the right or the big market opportunity. And we look for products that I think will be digital distributed, as I mentioned, via partnerships and embedded capabilities, heavily rely on data and technology, because I specifically believe that data and technology are the infrastructure that eventually will be the supporting infrastructure for that product to sell. And we try to understand why would the customer eventually choose that specific product. Will it be the business strategy, the pricing, the services that encompass that product, the customer experience itself, etc. And eventually, and maybe I needed to start with that, we look for the team, right, that could build it. It's not a simple thing to do or to find, but we look for teams that you feel they are on a mission to build something and could build this great company. It requires a lot of meetings and creating the bond between the investor and the company. But when we do that, eventually that team will drive the business, right? It's not the VC who will do that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a follow-on question there for Nabil, really, which is, you come in at a later stage, but it's a competitive market, isn't it, to get good deals. So just sort of reflecting on what Gilbert says with regard to kind of the stage at which you come in at, how are you helping? How are you sort of helping these companies build out, and how are you managing to sort of win deals in your direction? What's the expertise that you're offering that people think actually Gulf Capital is the place to come for me to scale up this company now?
No, I think that absolutely right, and I agree with you. Like on first the embedded finance, I do definitely see this growing heavily in the region. In fact, we saw that happening, and we had the announcement of our JDA POS, during the event, which was great, successful move from a lateral move from payments. But just to get back to the value creation, so I like to look at three things, basically, when you talk about value creation at Gulf Capital. The first one, which you touched upon, is people. I think it was Steve Jobs who talked about, you getting in the talent, and the talent tells you what to do. We truly believe in that. So, I mean, most of the JDA team know me very well, that you guys do a great job. So, like, kudos to you. You keep delivering. We just managed to find you. So that's when it comes to the team. You do the same thing with the advisors, as well as, board members. Because when you look at this business, many other players have done something very similar. So sometimes we call ourselves the square of the Middle East. We try to associate ourselves with other successful places. So the team is number one by far. The other two things that we've done extremely well is that this is a later stage investment. So you obviously will start adding governance. in the earlier stage, it's all about growth, growth, growth at all costs. And obviously, until a few years ago, no one even knew what the word profit was. Profit? No, you're not
that may
spending.
change now, of course.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but historically, no one knew the word profit. So it was, why are you not spending enough? Like, you need to burn more. So corporate governance is very important. And here you talk about committees, you talk about board, delegation of authorities, because you're preparing this company for an exit. Private equity is ultimately an exit to the next buyer. And the third and last bit, I'd combine everything under strategy. So strategy here, you're talking about organic versus inorganic growth. Do we go and buy someone else? And today it's a great vintage to, build up on a lot of these companies that unfortunately, had to go through a lot of turmoil, but, it's a great opportunity for acquisitions. At the same time, you look at these lateral movements into products. So if you're doing payments, why not move and do POS and do other things? So the expertise that we bring, again, are people, governance, and strategy.
So I think there's a follow-up question there. Obviously, Gulf Capital in the Gulf, you're in a reasonably good position with regard to liquidity, given the oil price situation, war in Russia and all the rest of it. What are your expectations over the next 6 months as as this sort of market turmoil plays out in Europe and North America? Is that going to create opportunities for you, or is that going to create problems for your portfolio companies?
No, I think so far we've been pretty much insulated. I'd say especially in Saudi Arabia, if you guys seen the markets have delivered phenomenally well. Oil price at 90 means that there's a lot more investments going into the economy. The Saudi government, for instance, has continued with the direction of MBS, pushing a lot of money back into the economy, which was not happening before. So that will definitely help keep the ecosystem alive. But the point on valuation is another discussion. Like, at some point in time, would I invest in a business that's growing at X% at a value of Y in the US, or would I invest in a Saudi business just because it's Saudi?
Yeah, well, this is unfortunately we don't have time for that discussion, because that's very interesting, isn't it? This kind of shift of culture into, how do we get the liquidity that's here to stay here? But let's talk about that another time. Are you looking at Egypt, which is also similarly has a government which is also pushing hard and fast to invest?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually opened as Gulf Capital our offices in Egypt. So we do have a full team there. In fact, yesterday we announced one of our follow-on investments into Visita, which is the largest health tech play. And that's just continuous belief into the Egyptian market. Despite the current turmoil that the market is going through, it's 100 million people. You can't ignore that.
No, you definitely can't. And if anyone's not been to Cairo recently, I have to tell you, you have to go see the new Cairo they're building. It's a sight to behold. Shinez, I want to turn to you, and thanks for your patience. I know that it's challenging with 5 speakers on the panel. I think Nabil raises a very interesting question. He obviously taking a different view in terms of the type of target investment they're going to make. You're working at the sharper end with early stage companies. Of course, in that process, the markets have turned. Profit is something they do have to think about. It's actually a word they have to know the meaning of. You're not offering investment, but then you're Google, so you have that kind of brand recognition. How are you working with startups at the moment with this sort of changing macroeconomic picture?
Yeah, it's actually been very, very interesting. We've been monitoring the market for months now to try to predict what was going to happen.
Good luck with that.
It's like everyone else. So we have three main initiatives to work with startups in MENA. First of all, we cover all the markets here with a priority on Egypt, Saudi, and UAE. And yeah, I think to your point, Nabil, Saudi, everything is going great, UAE as well, but Egypt has been hit quite hardly, and we see it. The first one is kind of early stage. We call it Google for Startups. So here, early stage startup can get a little bit of mentorship in tech, whether it's ads or cloud or anything around pitching and strategy, etc. Then you move into the next stage, which is Google for Startup Cloud. And here it's mainly helping companies adopt either infrastructure or AI. This program is amazing because it also gives cloud credits. and we have an amazing team. It's actually one of the biggest teams in Google in charge of startups. And then you have the programs I lead, which are more for scale-ups. So these are invite only, where we map the market and we try to see who's been raising a lot, and we help them acquire more customers, grow, be profitable. We basically do online sales, and in Fintech, online customer acquisition. Simon left.
Insist on giving us these bottles which don't open. I think that might be an open one, actually. We'll get you some water. JP, let's turn to you. You know, focused on blockchain. What are you? What's the sell for you to the market, to the startups that are out there? What are you offering them, and how are you competing? How is this sort of change in the market? Is that gonna help you in the sense of being able to get access to better, stronger deals?
Sure. So we are an incubator with 4 pillars, which is knowledge, contact, visibility, and fuel of funding. So we help young startups by helping them to incubate by providing them knowledge and connections, visibility in larger events that we organize, like India Blockchain Week, Thai Blockchain Week, Malaysia Blockchain Week. So our incubation is blended with the event, and we give usually $10,000 to $60,000 per project. That includes strategic services worth $10,000 for a tech check, event check, and a marketing check. So as I said, it's pretty riskier at the idea stage, and many of our startups haven't been able to make to the larger market. But yes, if you see the coin market cap, there are 20,000 plus cryptocurrencies, out of which 100 constitutes around 90% of the trillion market share. So nowadays, Web3 and Metaverse startup wants to have best of both worlds, via equity round and via the token round. So we help them to raise via token round, and that's the fuel of funding everybody should look forward as a young startup. I always say that raising via token is always the best way of raising money without losing equity, because these investors are addresses and not a human who is directly interfering to your boardroom. They are not asking for your AGMs and dividends. Of course, when startup raise via token, there is a need for a regulatory of managing the funds, and usage of fund in our industry is not still in a compliant way. So I believe that when the fiat world, the real world meets the crypto world, more regulations will come up, and the fundraising will become more regulated.
And are you sort of reflecting on what the rest of the panel have said here? Are you now asking your investees to think, actually, you've got to, the horizon's got to be shorter. We've got to get to money, to profitability. We've got to get to a kind of a viable or valid business case faster. Is that something you're telling your investee companies?
Yes. So primarily, as you see, ICO, IDO, IO, STO, all type of offerings have been not treated similarly like raising via equity. So investment in our vertical is always debatable, because there have been a lot of rug pulls, a lot of dump and pump, and couple of Ponzi schemes has happened in crypto industry. So that's why the mainstream investors or VCs are not coming here. Now, with better regulations coming in place, I always look forward for the startup with the promoters and the founders having a better innovative background, and then they can have best of both worlds. Not only going on coin market cap on the top, but also on the equity side of the market. So we always look forward for raising via token, which is much easier as compared to equity investment, and then eventually build your product MVP and go to pre-series A or series A.
Alan, how's the market coming along for you at the minute? Are you having to kind of compete? I imagine you've had to compete pretty hard. Is your kind of outlook getting a bit rosier, or where are you on the curve?
Well, to be honest, I think for round A funds, and we go all the way to round C, 2021 was a little bit of a hell, because there was no time to do due diligence. If you're a technical fund and you want to get into the details and not just look at the team on Zoom, you didn't have that opportunity. So we kind of little bit breathed out, to be honest, in 2022, because we had a lot of unconventional investors in the VC market, let's call that. And that always creates a bubble, and it creates a hype, and then it goes down. So overall, we're a little bit relieved because we can do our proper work. Second is, I think the current market really puts a focus, are you solving a real problem or are you not? Because people do have real problems. There are some economic pressure in the world. And that question we now start, not how fast do you grow, but this is what is explain the real problem you're trying to solve, and then is there willingness to pay to solve the problem? Because there's lots of fun things to do, but nobody's willing to pay for it. So your economics analysis, while we don't obviously push profitability in round A, we have to have a very clear path to it. We also have a very clear proof that somebody is actually willing to pay for your service, as opposed to this is a nice to have. And if you get it for free, that's great, and on venture money and on this. The other thing that we look very carefully is we issue our trends every year, and we actually almost religiously follow around them where we invest. And if there is a trend of, for example, access to capital, that's most of the people working on the platforms and self-employed platform don't have credit. Is this problem going to be solved by a new technology, by new machine learning, by AI? And then you follow a trend in this. The second is we actually work very closely with PEs in saying, what do you want out of these companies in 4 or 5 years? Because IPO is completely cyclical. Sometimes they want growth, sometimes they want profitability, then they want growth again. You know, it's much easier to work with the larger investors which want to take a big piece afterwards or grow this company to a next stage is, what do you expect? What do you want from them? So that's our approach.
Yeah, the horizon is a big thing, isn't it? Really getting that kind of mindset of the horizon, balanced between the parties. In markets like here, where of course the regulations differ, between small and large countries. We think of Egypt versus Qatar versus Saudi Arabia. How do you incorporate the kind of regulatory challenge, things that, the fact that rules can change when you're looking at companies that are in regulated markets?
So one is the basic thing that you learn if you work in Europe, especially and trying to scale, that you have a very micro-based architecture to be able to change exact parameters depending on regulation. Not only as they change rapidly and in different countries. So Spain can introduce something, and France can be completely different this, and it's continuous. So that flexibility of any fintech to be able to change is part of the actual architectural design of that product. Second is local teams. We still didn't see this kind of magical thing where everybody sits in the head office in some great company and everything still works. Everybody sits in London and everything works wonderfully in Italy. Everybody sits in wonderful Dubai and everything still just works in Amman. It just doesn't. So we still believe to have a local presence is important. We actually, because we're serious about the engine, just opened our Dubai office, and fintechs were the same. Do you have the local knowledge? The final thing which I say, we actually love investing in immigrants, and we see the ideal how the startups actually work. You have a local talent actually partnering with an immigrant or global talent, and that's what you get the best startups.
Knowledge and connectivity, absolutely. We're kind of towards the end of the panel. It's towards the end of the day, but we can keep it going because I think we've got a really interesting group of people, and we've got a full house actually. Have we got any questions for our investor panel? Don't be shy. Nope, going once, going twice. All right, well, we'll close. We'll kind of start to wrap up the conversation a little bit. Do we have one? Good.
My name is Ali Raja. I'm going to ask the Google lady, Shanez, how do you feel that these types of conferences like GITEX and how they bring all these companies here, how do you feel that do you feel like that they're a good avenue for startups to meet investors to meet startups, etc., and for companies to actually grow, or what would your opinion on that be?
So just to make sure I understand, you're asking if being here
Are these good for the ecosystem? Yeah, what's the value of a sort of marketplace ecosystem event like GITEX in terms of, helping the ecosystem, but also, for you to identify partners to work with?
Yeah. So I think GITEX and similar forums are amazing because, we're behind our screens all day and we see names. We map markets. We look at who raised what. So this is just an amazing opportunity for us to be here, and I think for startup as well. But obviously, I work for Google and I do online advertising. So I think having an offline presence and connecting with people is as important as growing online and being there. And we see this. We've been trying to educate our startups a lot that, understanding your audience online and serving them the product that they need is so powerful. And of course, everything goes together. We always recommend to do a mix of online and offline and even Google competitors because this is how you actually grow and sell online.
Thank you very much. Nabil?
No, I think it's a great question, but I think one thing that's very important is to do your investor due diligence as well. Because as much as we need to understand you need to understand the investor. Because if you're receiving, for example, a mail in your inbox saying, hey, would you like to invest in a manufacturing plant in Ethiopia? And you know that we don't even do that. We're mostly into tech. And you're attending a conference and asking that question, then it's the due diligence that hasn't happened on your end. So if this venue is great for your vehicle, for your investment, then by all means, continue doing that.
Maybe I could add just one sentence. I think it's a great opportunity for startups coming from other ecosystems to GITEX, to Dubai, to the Emirates, especially if they don't have presence yet or any kind of business activity, because within that kind of a conference, you get exposed to the market and the local ecosystem, and it's amazing, right? This is, I think, the greatest value for startups coming to here, and of course, value for local players here to meet other companies from other ecosystems.
From an Israel perspective, it's a sizable innovation tech ecosystem. What have you kind of learned over the years that you've seen that sort of help recycle exited entrepreneurs to keep the money back in the system and to reinvent?
Yeah, so I think first of all, I've been to all the halls during the last 2 days, and if you'll go to one of the halls here, you will see a great presence of Israeli tech around cybersecurity. I think this is the most capitalized opportunity Israel took yet, and probably not invested enough yet to create the right business cooperation in other sectors. I think there is a lot to be done in fintech and other kind of AI technologies and others. And that will create more business engagement, more capital, going back and forth, more opportunities for local business capabilities here in the future.
Nabil, do you have a view on your kind of role in sort of helping the ecosystem grow over the next year? I mean, clearly GIDEA is a great story. We hope there'll be many more. What's your take on how you can play a part in that?
No, I think again we are we are looking out for a lot more investments. I personally look after fintech investments, but as Gulf Capital, we look at business services, healthcare, and technology. And within technology, I tend to focus on fintech. But I'd say one key thing that sometimes some founders may pass on this idea is that you don't necessarily have to go after that white space and, compete so much on your CAC, and you end up spending so much money to generate $500,000, at which point no investor would pay attention to you. There are so many other ways for you to tackle the same issues. So think outside the box. So in the case of GIDEA, for example, it started mostly on the banking side, and now it's moving to the business side.
I think JP's got to leave for a call. Just a sort of final word. Where will we be when we're back here next year for you?
Thank you very much, guys, for having me on the panel. I have a scheduled call. I need to honor that commitment. If anyone is looking forward for incubating or entering into from Web 2.0 to 3.0, reach out to us. We'll be very happy to help you. And thanks, everyone. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's great that there is such gathering. I think it's important to come together. I think one of the most important things that I give to startups is how you follow up after your meetings is as important, even sometimes more important than the meetings you had. Because we have lots of meetings, lots of people want to find out. It needs to be followed up properly. So how you follow up is important. To create an ecosystem, you have to invest in the ecosystem. And I think this is an investment. So for me, this is very important.
Fantastic. Great. Well, please join me in thanking our great panel today. There you have it. Do your homework, work with partners, and go big. Thanks very much. We're back. That's the end of the program for this stage for today. We'll be back tomorrow at 10:30. Tomorrow is the CX Forum. We'll be looking at the customer experience at the level of fintech and financial adoption. Thanks very much, everybody.